The blood-red sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty streets of Redemption Creek, Montana, as Willow Evans ran for her life, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a wild Mustang. The year was 1876, and the law was closing in not for justice, but for vengeance. Willow's boots kicked up dust as she darted between buildings, the sound of angry voices growing distant behind her. She'd been running for 3 days now, ever since the incident at the Blackwater Saloon. It wasn't supposed to end with a man dead, but when Mayor Thompson's son had cornered her in that back room, his hands tearing at her dress and his whiskey breath hot against her neck, she'd reached for the letter opener on the desk. One moment of desperate defense had turned her into the most wanted woman in the county. The cool night air filled her lungs as she paused in an alley, pressing her back against the rough wooden wall of the general store. Her once fine blue dress was now torn and stained with dirt and sweat, her auburn hair falling loose from its pins. At 22, Willow had never imagined she'd find herself in such a predicament. The daughter of a respected schoolteacher, she'd been raised on books and proper manners, not survival in the unforgiving Montana wilderness. "Miss, you all right?" The deep voice startled her, and Willow spun around, ready to bolt again. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. He wore a dusty black Stetson pulled low over his eyes, but she could see the strong line of his jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble. His duster coat hung open, revealing a simple blue shirt and worn leather vest. The silver star pinned to his chest caught what little light remained. "Marshal," she whispered, taking a step backward. Her hand slipped inside her pocket, fingers closing around the small derringer she'd taken from her father's desk drawer before fleeing. "Deputy," he corrected, raising his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. "Deputy Marshal Hayes Norton." His voice was softer than she expected from a man of his stature, a low rumble like distant thunder. "And you must be Miss Evans." Willow tensed, ready to run again, but the deputy made no move to apprehend her. "The posse is headed east," he said, nodding toward the mountains. "Mayor's convinced you're making for the railroad. Are you here to arrest me?" Her voice trembled despite her efforts to appear brave. Hayes studied her for a long moment. "That depends. I'd like to hear your side of what happened first." Willow blinked in surprise. No one had asked for her version of events. The moment Thompson's son was found dead, his father had declared her a cold-blooded murderess. The testimonies of the working girls who'd heard her screams for help had been dismissed, the evidence of her torn clothing ignored. "He tried to force himself on me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I defended myself. I never meant to kill him." Hayes nodded slowly. "That's what Pearl from the saloon said too." He glanced over his shoulder, then back at her. "Look, the mayor's got half the county searching for you, and they're not interested in a fair trial. You need to get out of here." "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've known Daniel Thompson since we were boys, and this isn't the first time he's forced himself on a woman. Just the first time one fought back hard enough." His eyes, which she could now see were a deep green, held something that looked like respect. "There's an old trapper's cabin about 10 miles north of here. You can hide there tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next." Willow hesitated. "How do I know I can trust you?" Hayes reached inside his vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to her. In the fading light, she unfolded it to see a wanted poster with her face crudely sketched, and a reward of $500 for her capture, dead or alive. "I tore that down from outside the telegraph office," he said. "If I wanted the reward, I'd have drawn my gun, not started a conversation." Something about his steady gaze convinced her. With few options left, Willow nodded. "My horse is behind the livery," Hayes said. "We should move before someone spots us." The journey through the darkening wilderness was tense but uneventful. Willow sat behind Hayes on his sturdy bay gelding, her arms reluctantly circling his waist for balance. They rode in silence, the only sounds the rhythmic hoofbeats and the occasional call of a night bird. The cabin was small but solid, nestled in a grove of pines near a clear stream. Hayes lit a lamp and a small fire in the stone fireplace, revealing a simple but clean interior with a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a few basic supplies. "It's not much," he said, "but it'll keep you safe for now." "Why are you risking your position to help me?" Willow asked, warming her hands by the fire. Hayes removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the edges. He ran a hand through it, seeming to consider his words carefully. "I wear this badge to protect people, not to serve a man's vendetta," he finally said. "What happened to you was wrong, and what's happening now is even worse." He glanced out the small window into the darkness. "Get some rest. I'll be back at first light with supplies." True to his word, Hayes returned as dawn broke, bringing food, clean clothes, and troubling news. The mayor had doubled the reward for Willow's capture and had telegraphed the territorial governor requesting additional men for the search. "It's worse than I thought," Hayes admitted as they shared a simple breakfast. "Thompson's claiming you were sweet on his son, then killed him in a jealous rage when he showed interest in another girl." Willow's hand trembled as she set down her coffee cup. "That's absurd. I barely knew him." "Truth doesn't matter much when a powerful man wants revenge," Hayes said grimly. "His version is the one people will believe." "What can I do? Where can I go?" Desperation tinged her voice. Hayes leaned forward, his expression serious. "I have a brother in Oregon, runs a small ranch near the coast. You could start fresh there where no one knows you." Oregon. The word sounded like a distant dream. "That's hundreds of miles away." "It is, and the journey won't be easy." Hayes studied her face. "But staying here means a hanging, Miss Evans, or worse." Willow closed her eyes briefly, letting the reality of her situation wash over her. Everything she'd ever known was in Redemption Creek, her childhood home, her father's grave, her mother's garden. But Hayes was right. There was nothing left for her here except death. "They'll never forgive me," she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. The deputy's expression softened, and for the first time since they'd met, he smiled slightly. "Then let's go where forgiveness lives." Those simple words ignited something inside her, a spark of hope where before there had been only despair. Perhaps there was a place where her past wouldn't define her, where she could begin again. "When would we leave?" she asked. "Tonight," Hayes replied. "Under cover of darkness, I know trails the posse won't think to check." "We," Willow caught the pronoun. "You're coming with me." Hayes stood and moved to the window, looking out at the wilderness beyond. "I've been wearing this badge for 6 years. Thought I was doing good." He turned back to her, his decision evident in his eyes. "But what's happening to you isn't justice. It's just powerful men protecting their own. I can't be part of that system anymore. You'd give up everything to help a woman you barely know." "I'm giving up a job, Miss Evans. Not everything." He adjusted his hat. "Besides, I've been thinking about my brother's offer to join him out west for some time now. This just speeds up my timeline a bit." As night fell, they prepared to leave. Hayes had returned to town one last time, resigning his position and collecting what supplies he could without arousing suspicion. He'd traded his deputy's horse for 2 fresh mounts from a farmer who owed him a favor, animals that wouldn't be connected to either of them. Willow had spent the day preparing as well, washing her face and hands in the stream, mending her dress as best she could, and braiding her long auburn hair to keep it from tangling during the journey. The clean clothes Hayes had brought, simple men's attire that would be more practical for travel, were slightly too large but would serve her well. "We'll head northwest," Hayes explained as they packed the horses. "Avoid the main trails and settlements where word might have spread. If anyone asks, you're my cousin William, heading to visit family in Oregon after the death of your parents." Willow nodded, tucking her hair up under a worn cap. The disguise was simple but effective from a distance. In the men's clothing, she could pass for a slender youth. "How long will the journey take?" she asked. 4 weeks if we're lucky, longer if we run into trouble." Hayes secured the last of their supplies. "Winter's coming, but we should reach Oregon before the heavy snows if we keep a steady pace." As they mounted their horses and left the safety of the cabin, Willow took one last look at the eastern horizon, where Redemption Creek lay beyond the mountains. The life she'd known was over. replaced by uncertainty and danger, but also possibility. Beside her rode a man she barely knew, but who had risked everything to help her, a man whose quiet strength somehow made the terrifying unknown ahead seem less daunting. They rode in silence through the night, putting miles between themselves and the posse that would surely be hunting them by morning. The moon lit their path through forests and across streams, while owls called overhead and distant wolves howled their ancient songs. Despite her exhaustion, Willow felt more alive than she had in years, each breath of the cool mountain air reminding her that, for now at least, she was free. As dawn broke, Hayes led them to a small clearing beside a bubbling creek, sheltered by towering pines that would hide their camp from casual observers. "We should rest here," he said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. "The animals need it, and so do we." Willow's legs trembled as they touched the ground, unused to so many hours in the saddle. Hayes caught her elbow to steady her, the brief contact sending an unexpected warmth through her tired body. "Thank you," she murmured, quickly stepping away. They worked together to set up a small camp, Willow gathering firewood while Hayes tended to the horses. Soon a small, nearly smokeless fire was burning, over which Hayes prepared a simple breakfast of coffee and johnny cakes. As they ate, Willow studied her companion in the morning light. Away from town, Hayes seemed different, more relaxed, the lines of tension around his eyes less pronounced. His movements were efficient but unhurried as he checked their supplies and consulted a worn map. "May I ask you something, Deputy Norton?" she ventured. "Just Hayes now," he corrected with a slight smile. The deputy stayed back in Redemption Creek. "Hayes, then." The informality felt strange on her tongue. "Why did you become a lawman in the first place?" He looked up from the map, considering her question. "My father was killed by outlaws when I was 14. Road agents hit his stagecoach on the way back from Helena." His voice was matter of fact, but Willow could hear the old pain beneath the words. "I decided then that I wanted to stand between good people and those who would harm them. And now." Hayes folded the map carefully. "Now I see that sometimes the law itself can be the thing harming good people." He met her gaze directly. "What about you, Miss Evans? What was your life before all this?" "Willow," she said. "If you're just Hayes now, then I'm just Willow." She wrapped her hands around her tin cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "I was a teacher at the schoolhouse. After my father died last year, teaching was all I had left." "You miss it," Hayes observed. "The children, yes. Teaching them to read, watching their faces light up when they understood something new." A sad smile touched her lips. "The school board was less enjoyable. They had very firm ideas about how a teacher should conduct herself." "Too restrictive," Willow laughed softly. "Mr. Peterson nearly had an apoplexy when I suggested teaching the girls basic arithmetic alongside the boys. Apparently, female minds aren't suited for numbers." Hayes shook his head, a ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "Seems to me female minds are suited for whatever they set themselves to." Something about his simple acceptance warmed Willow more than the fire before them. For a moment, they just looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. The moment broke when a twig snapped in the forest behind them. Hayes was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Stay here," he whispered, moving silently toward the sound. Willow's heart raced as Hayes disappeared among the trees. She reached for the small knife he'd given her for the journey, clutching it tightly as seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, Hayes returned, relief evident in his expression. "Just a deer," he said, "but we should move on. We've rested long enough." As they continued their journey, the terrain grew more challenging. They followed game trails through dense forests, forded shallow rivers, and skirted the edges of small settlements. Each night they made camp in hidden places, taking turns keeping watch while the other slept. On the third night, rain began to fall, a cold, persistent drizzle that soaked through their clothes and made it impossible to light a fire. They took shelter beneath a rocky overhang, huddled together for warmth, their horses standing miserable and drenched nearby. "I'm sorry about this," Hayes said, draping his duster over Willow's shoulders. "Weather wasn't supposed to turn this early in the season." "It's not your fault," Willow replied, teeth chattering slightly despite the extra layer. Nature follows its own rules. Hayes pulled some jerky and hardtack from his saddlebag, offering her a share of their cold supper. They ate in silence, listening to the rain pattering against the leaves and stone. "Tell me about your brother," Willow said eventually. "The one in Oregon." Hayes's expression softened at the mention of his sibling. "Henry's 3 years older than me, always had more sense too. When our father died, he knew there was nothing left for us in Montana. Worked on cattle drives for a few years, saved every penny, then headed west and bought land near the coast." "Is he married?" "Widowed," Hayes said. "His wife Sarah died in childbirth 2 years ago along with the baby. He writes that he's doing well enough, but..." He shrugged. "Brothers can tell when something's missing from the letters." Willow felt a pang of sympathy. "And he wants you to join him on the ranch, been asking for years. Says the land's too much for one man to work properly." Hayes leaned back against the rock wall. "I kept putting him off. Duty, responsibility, excuses, really. Truth is, I was scared to leave what I knew, even if what I knew wasn't making me happy." The honesty of his admission surprised her. "And now I see that staying in a place that's wrong for you just because it's familiar is its own kind of prison." His eyes met hers in the gathering darkness. "What about you? Any family left?" Willow shook her head. "My mother died when I was 16, consumption. Father followed last year, heart failure, the doctor said, but I think it was grief that really took him. They were devoted to each other." "No siblings?" "A brother once." The old sorrow welled up inside her. "William, he drowned when we were children. We were playing by the river and I was supposed to be watching him, but I got distracted by a book I'd brought along." She swallowed hard. "He was only 6. Hayes's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers wrapping gently around her own. "That's a heavy burden for a child to carry." "My father never blamed me," Willow said quietly, "but I saw it in his eyes sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. The question of why I survived and William didn't. Is that why you became a teacher?" For the brother who never got to learn, the insight startled her. No one had ever made that connection before, but as soon as Hayes said the words, Willow knew they were true. "I suppose it was," she admitted. "I never thought of it that way." They fell silent again, but Hayes didn't release her hand and Willow didn't pull away. The simple human contact was comforting in the cold darkness, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them both. They slept sitting up against the rock wall, shoulders touching, while the rain continued its steady rhythm through the night. Morning brought clearing skies and renewed determination. They pressed on through rugged country, avoiding the main trails where passes might be searching. Hayes proved to be an expert guide, reading the land as easily as Willow read books. He taught her basic tracking skills, how to identify edible plants and how to move quietly through the forest. In turn, Willow shared her knowledge of stars and literature, reciting poems from memory to pass the long hours in the saddle. She was a quick study with the knife he'd given her, practicing throwing it at trees during their rest stops until she could hit her target consistently. A week into their journey, they reached a small trading post on the border between Montana and Idaho territories. It was a risk to stop there, but they needed supplies, and Hayes judged it remote enough that news of Willow might not have reached it yet. "Stay close to me," he murmured as they approached the cluster of rough-hewn buildings. "Let me do the talking." Willow nodded, adjusting her cap lower over her eyes and hunching her shoulders slightly to disguise her figure in the oversized clothes. In her men's attire, with dirt strategically smudged on her face, she made a convincing enough youth that a casual observer shouldn't look twice. The trading post was run by an elderly man with a wild white beard and one cloudy eye. He barely glanced at Willow as Hayes negotiated for coffee, flour, and ammunition, exchanging small nuggets of gold from a pouch he kept hidden inside his shirt. "Any news from the east?" Hayes asked casually as the old man wrapped their purchases. "Not much reaches us out here," the trader replied, "though there was a fella through yesterday asking about a woman and a deputy who gone missing from some town over Montana way." He squinted his good eye at Hayes, said there was good money for information. Willow felt her heart rate quicken, but Hayes's expression remained neutral. That's so, what this woman's supposed to have done, murdered some big man's son from what I gathered, the traitor shrugged. Course, I ain't seen no woman traveling alone, and I told him such. Man seemed mighty determined, though, said he'd be checking all the routes west. Appreciate the information, Hayes said, collecting their supplies. We'll keep an eye out on the trail. Outside, as they secured the packages to their horses, Willow whispered, they're closer than we thought. Hayes nodded grimly. We'll need to be more careful, take the high mountain passes instead of the valley route. Will that slow us down? Yes, but it's better than running into a search party. He checked the cinch on his saddle. The mountains are dangerous this time of year, but they're also our best chance of losing anyone on our trail. The next days brought them into the heart of the Bitterroot Range. The trails grew steeper and narrower, sometimes disappearing entirely, forcing them to pick their way carefully through rocky terrain. Nights were bitter cold at the higher elevations, the temperature dropping well below freezing. Despite the hardships, Willow found herself growing stronger each day. The physical demands of the journey had toughened her body, while the constant vigilance had sharpened her mind. She no longer felt like the sheltered schoolteacher from Redemption Creek. That woman seemed to belong to another lifetime entirely. On their 10th night in the mountains, they made camp in a small cave they discovered near a high alpine meadow. For the first time in days, they dared to build a fire, the cave's configuration drawing the smoke up and out through a natural chimney in the rock. As Willow stirred a pot of beans cooking over the flames, she glanced at Hayes, who was cleaning his revolver by the cave entrance. In the firelight, his features seemed softer, the stern set of his jaw relaxed as he focused on his task. I've been thinking, she said, about what happens when we reach Oregon. Hayes looked up. My brother will welcome you, he's a good man. I'm grateful for that, Willow said, but I meant more, what happens with us? She felt heat rise to her cheeks, unrelated to the fire's warmth. You've risked everything to help me, Hayes, your career, your reputation, possibly your life. Why? Hayes set the revolver aside and moved closer to the fire, his expression thoughtful. When I first saw you in that alley in Redemption Creek, something changed for me, not just because I believed your story, though I did. It was seeing firsthand how quickly justice can become vengeance when power is involved. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing upward. All my life I've tried to do what's right, follow the rules, uphold the law. But that night, I realized sometimes the right thing and the lawful thing aren't the same. His eyes met hers across the flames. Helping you wasn't just about saving you, Willow. It was about saving myself too. From what? From becoming the kind of man who'd turn a blind eye to injustice because it was easier. The kind who'd hang an innocent woman to keep his job. He shook his head. I couldn't live with myself if I'd done that. Willow moved around the fire to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. And now, after all these miles together, Hayes was silent for a long moment, the firelight playing across his features. Now I know I made the right choice, he finally said, his voice low. Not just because justice demanded it, but because he hesitated, then turned to face her fully. Because every day with you makes me want to be a better man than I was the day before. The sincerity in his eyes made Willow's breath catch. Slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wished, she reached out and placed her hand over his. You're already a good man, Hayes Norton, she whispered, the best I've ever known. His fingers interlaced with hers, rough calluses against her softer skin. For a heartbeat, they simply existed in that moment, connected by touch and the unspoken feelings growing between them. Then, with gentle deliberation, Hayes leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. Willow answered by sliding her free hand to his shoulder, drawing him closer as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, both were breathing faster. Hayes rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. I didn't plan for this to happen, he murmured. Neither did I, Willow replied, a small smile curving her lips. But I'm glad it did. They spent the night talking by the fire, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. The easy camaraderie that had developed during their journey transformed into something deeper, a connection neither had expected but both welcomed. In the morning, they continued their journey with renewed purpose, the shared feelings between them adding urgency to their quest for safety. The high mountain passes proved challenging, but effective. They saw no sign of pursuit for days as they traversed the rugged landscape. As they began their descent toward the Idaho plains, however, their luck changed. A sudden autumn storm caught them on an exposed ridge, bringing driving sleet that made the trail treacherous. Hayes's horse lost its footing on the slick rock, sliding several feet before regaining its balance. The animal was unhurt, but one of their supply bags tore free, tumbling down the steep slope and disappearing into the fog below. "Damn," Hayes muttered, surveying the situation. "That was most of our food." "Can we retrieve it?" Willow asked, peering through the curtain of sleet. Hayes shook his head. "Too dangerous in this weather. We need to find shelter first, then worry about supplies." They pressed on through deteriorating conditions, the temperature dropping as daylight faded. By nightfall, they were soaked through and shivering with no suitable shelter in sight. "There," Willow suddenly called, pointing through the gloom. "Is that smoke?" Hayes squinted in the direction she indicated. A faint gray plume rose against the darkening sky, barely visible through the sleet. "Could be a campfire," he said, "or a cabin." "Or a trap," Willow added, voicing the concern they both felt. "We don't have many options," Hayes said grimly. "This storm's getting worse. If we stay out here much longer, we risk freezing." With cautious hope, they guided their exhausted horses toward the smoke. As they drew closer, the outline of a small cabin emerged from the gloom, light glowing through a single window. Hayes dismounted, helping Willow down from her horse. "Wait here with the animals," he whispered. "Let me check it out first." Drawing his revolver, he approached the cabin carefully, moving to the window to peer inside. After a moment, he holstered his weapon and returned to Willow. "It's an old trapper by the looks of him," Hayes reported. "Alone, as far as I can tell. Do you think he'll help us?" "Only one way to find out." They approached the cabin door together, leading their horses. Hayes knocked firmly, his other hand resting near his holstered revolver, just in case. The door creaked open to reveal a grizzled old man with a tangled gray beard and suspicious eyes. A shotgun rested in the crook of his arm, not quite pointed at them but ready to be raised if needed. "What business you got here in this weather?" the old man demanded. "Looking for shelter from the storm," Hayes replied calmly. "We lost some supplies on the trail." "Happy to trade work or gold for a dry place to spend the night." The trapper's rheumy eyes shifted from Hayes to Willow, narrowing slightly as he took in her disguise. For a terrifying moment, Willow thought he would refuse them or worse, recognize her from some wanted poster. Instead, he grunted and stepped back from the door. "Ain't got much, but the roof don't leak. Horses can go in the lean-to round back." Relief flooded through Willow as they hurried to settle the horses in the crude shelter behind the cabin. Inside, the trapper's home was small but tidy, warmed by a well-maintained stone fireplace. Furs lined the walls, and various tools of the trapping trade hung from hooks and rafters. "Name's Ezekiel," the old man said as they removed their wet outer garments. "Most folks just call me Zeke." "I'm Hayes, and this is my cousin William," Hayes replied, maintaining Willow's cover story. "We're much obliged for the shelter, Zeke." The trapper grunted again, busying himself with a pot hanging over the fire. "Stew's almost ready, ain't fancy, but it's hot." They ate gratefully, the venison stew warming them from the inside. Zeke asked few questions beyond where they were headed, seeming content with Hayes's vague answer about family in Oregon. As they finished eating, the old man leaned back in his chair, studying them with shrewd eyes. "Your cousin don't talk much," he observed. Willow cleared her throat, pitching her voice slightly lower. "Just tired from the trail, sir." Zeke's mouth twitched beneath his beard. "Sir, is it? Been a long time since anybody called old Zeke, sir." He rose stiffly, collecting the empty bowls. "You two can have the pallet by the fire. I sleep in the loft." When the trapper had climbed the ladder to his sleeping area, Hayes and Willow exchanged relieved glances. "He knows," Willow whispered. "Probably," Hayes agreed, "but he doesn't seem inclined to make trouble over it." They settled on the fur-covered pallet, lying close together for warmth. Outside, the storm howled, but inside the cabin they were dry and safe for the moment. "Get some rest," Hayes murmured, his arm encircling her waist. "We've got a long ride ahead tomorrow." Willow nestled against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Despite the danger that still pursued them, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. With Hayes beside her, the future no longer seemed so frightening. Morning brought clearing skies and an unexpected gesture of kindness from their host. Zeke provided them with smoked venison, dried berries, and cornmeal to replace some of their lost supplies, waving away Hayes's offered payment. "Been alone up here for 15 years, the old trapper said as they prepared to leave. "Gets lonely. Nice to have company once in a while." As Hayes checked the horse's tack, Zeke drew Willow aside, his voice low. "Don't know what trouble you're running from, miss, but that man of yours would walk through fire for you." His weathered face creased in a rare smile. "Seen the way he looks at you, that kind of devotion don't come along every day." Willow blushed, abandoning the pretense of her disguise. "Thank you, Mr. Zeke, for everything." "Just Zeke, miss." He patted her shoulder awkwardly. "You take care now, lot of country between here and the coast, not all of it friendly." With renewed supplies and spirits, they continued their journey westward. The terrain gradually changed from mountains to rolling hills covered in pine forests. Game was plentiful, allowing Hayes to hunt fresh meat when their supplies ran low. Willow's skill with the knife improved to the point where she could reliably hit small targets, adding rabbits and squirrels to their diet. They avoided towns and settlements when possible, but occasionally had to risk stopping at isolated farms or trading posts for supplies they couldn't procure from the land. At each stop, Hayes would casually inquire about news from the east, gathering information about the search that might still be following them. 2 weeks into Idaho territory, they received troubling news from a blacksmith where they'd stopped to have one of the horses reshod. Mayor Thompson had expanded the search, hiring Pinkerton detectives to track them across state lines. The reward for Willow had been increased to $1,000, with an additional $500 for Hayes, now described as her accomplice in escape and murder. "We need to be more careful," Hayes said as they made camp that night, farther from the trail than usual. "Pinkertons are professional trackers. They won't give up easily, especially with that kind of money on the line. Will we make it to Oregon?" Willow asked, the old fear creeping back into her voice. Hayes moved to sit beside her, taking her hand in his. "We will, I promise you that." His eyes held a determination that bolstered her courage. "We've come too far to fail now." That night, their embrace was more desperate than before, the knowledge of the danger behind them adding urgency to their touches. What had begun as comfort and connection deepened into passion as they sought reassurance in each other's arms. Under the vast Idaho sky, they gave themselves to each other completely, their whispered words of love mingling with the night sounds of the wilderness around them. Afterward, lying together beneath Hayes's duster, Willow traced the lines of his face with gentle fingers. "I never expected to find love while running for my life," she murmured. Hayes caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I never expected to find it at all," he admitted. "After years of seeing the worst in people, I'd almost stopped believing in the good." His arms tightened around her. "You changed that, Willow. You made me believe again." "In what?" "In second chances. In new beginnings." He smiled, a rare, unguarded expression that transformed his normally serious features. "In the possibility that two broken people might make something whole together." Their tender moment was shattered by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Hayes was on his feet instantly, reaching for his clothes and revolver. "Get dressed," he whispered urgently. "Could be nothing, but we can't take chances." They doused the fire and packed their meager camp with practiced efficiency, listening as the hoofbeats grew closer. 3 riders, by the sound of it, moving at a steady pace along the main trail about a quarter-mile from their position. Hayes led Willow and the horses deeper into the forest, finding a dense thicket where they could observe without being seen. The moonlight was bright enough to reveal 3 men on horseback as they passed, their silhouettes distinct against the night sky. Pinkertons. Willow breathed, barely audible. Hayes nodded grimly. The men's bearing and the distinctive wide-brimmed hats were unmistakable. The lead rider reined in his horse, scanning the surrounding landscape with deliberate care. "They're checking for signs of a camp," Hayes whispered. "They know we're close." For several heart-stopping minutes, the riders remained stationary, apparently discussing their next move. Finally, to Willow and Hayes's immense relief, they continued down the trail, moving west the same direction they themselves were headed. "We can't follow the main trail anymore," Hayes said once the riders were out of earshot. "They'll be watching it, maybe setting traps." "What options do we have?" Hayes considered for a moment. "North, through the Nez Perce country. It's rougher terrain, less traveled. We might be able to cross into Oregon without being spotted." "The Nez Perce," Willow repeated. "Will they welcome strangers passing through their land?" "Not all of them," Hayes admitted. "Relations have been strained since the government started pushing for them to move to reservations. But I helped a Nez Perce man once, years ago. If we can find his band, we might get safe passage." It was a risk, but with Pinkertons ahead of them on the main route, they had few alternatives. At first light, they changed course, heading northwest toward the ancestral lands of the Nez Perce people. The journey became more difficult as they left established trails behind. They crossed swift rivers and climbed rocky ridges, always alert for signs of pursuit. Game became scarcer, forcing them to ration their food carefully. The nights grew colder as autumn deepened, frost forming on their blankets each morning. Despite the hardships, Willow found strength she never knew she possessed. The schoolteacher from Redemption Creek who had fled in terror was gone, replaced by a woman who could ride from dawn to dusk without complaint, who could help field dress a deer, who could stand watch while her companions slept. And through it all, her feelings for Hayes grew deeper. She loved his quiet strength, his unwavering moral compass, the gentleness that belied his rough exterior. In his arms at night, she found not just physical pleasure but a sense of belonging she'd thought lost forever. 5 days into Nez Perce territory, they encountered the first signs of the native people fresh tracks on a game trail, the remains of a recently abandoned camp. Hayes approached these signs with respect, leaving small gifts of tobacco at the camp site as a gesture of peaceful intentions. On the 6th day, as they crested a ridge overlooking a verdant valley, they found themselves suddenly surrounded. 6 Nez Perce warriors on horseback appeared as if from nowhere, their faces painted for war, rifles and bows trained on the intruders. Hayes slowly raised his hands to show he was not reaching for his weapon. "We come in peace," he said clearly. "I seek Chief Thunder Bear, who once called me friend." The warriors exchanged glances, then one moved his horse forward. He was younger than the others, his face marked with a distinctive scar that ran from temple to jaw. "Why does a white man claim friendship with Thunder Bear?" he demanded in accented but clear English. "7 winters ago, I found him wounded by white settlers near the Montana border," Hayes replied. "I tended his wounds and helped him return to his people when others would have left him to die." The scarred warrior studied Hayes intently. "I remember this story. You are the deputy who defied his own kind." "I was that deputy," Hayes confirmed. "Now I am just a man seeking safe passage with my wife." The words slipped out naturally, though he and Willow had exchanged no formal vows. After a tense moment, the warrior nodded. "Thunder Bear would wish to see the man who saved his life. You will come to our camp." With no real choice, they followed the warriors down into the valley, where a small village of about 20 lodges stood near a clear stream. Women paused in their work to watch the strangers, while children ran alongside the horses, curious but wary. At the center of the camp stood a large tipi decorated with painted symbols of power and protection. From it emerged an imposing figure, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose face, though lined with age, retained a fierce dignity. A dramatic scar across his chest was visible above his deerskin shirt. "Thunder Bear," Hayes said, dismounting and approaching with his hands open at his sides. The chief's stern expression gave way to surprise, then recognition. "Deputy Norton," he said in a deep, resonant voice, "many winters have passed since you bound my wounds and shared your fire." "I am no longer a deputy," Hayes replied, "and I come seeking help as you once did." Thunder Bear gestured toward Willow, who remained on her horse, uncertain of the protocol. "This woman, she is important to you. She is everything to me," Hayes said simply. The chief nodded, as if this answer satisfied him. "Then she is welcome in my lodge as you are welcome." He turned to address his people in their native tongue, then back to Hayes. "Come, we will talk." Inside Thunder Bear's lodge, they shared a pipe of friendship while Hayes explained their situation, the false accusations against Willow, their flight from justice, the Pinkertons hunting them. He was careful to tell the complete truth, knowing that anything less would be detected and would destroy the fragile trust between them. When he finished, Thunder Bear was silent for a long time, his dark eyes thoughtful. "Your woman did not murder this man's son," he finally said. "It was a statement, not a question. She defended herself against attack," Hayes confirmed. "Where I come from, that should not be a crime." "Nor among my people," Thunder Bear agreed. "A woman has the right to protect her body from those who would violate it." He looked at Willow with respect. "You have traveled far and faced many dangers. Your spirit is strong." "Thank you," Willow said, honored by his words. "Your hospitality means more than I can express." The chief nodded, then addressed Hayes again. "These men who hunt you, they will not stop at our borders. They bring trouble to my people if they find you here." "We understand," Hayes said. "We ask only for a night's rest and guidance on the safest route through your lands." Thunder Bear's weathered face creased in a slight smile. "I will do more than this, my friend. Tomorrow, my son Eagle Feather will guide you through the hidden trails to the great river that marks the edge of Oregon territory. There, you will be beyond the reach of these hunters." Relief washed over both Hayes and Willow at these words. For the first time in weeks, the promise of safety seemed within reach. That night, they were given a small lodge of their own, furnished with clean furs and supplied with fresh food. The Nez Perce women brought Willow new clothing to replace her worn disguise, a simple deerskin dress, adorned with subtle beadwork, while Hayes received a warm buffalo robe for the colder weather ahead. As they prepared for sleep, Willow noticed Hayes watching her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "What is it?" she asked, moving to sit beside him on the fur-covered ground. "When I told Thunder Bear you were everything to me," he said, taking her hands in his, "it wasn't just words to gain his help, it was the truth." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I love you, Willow. I think I have since that first night in Redemption Creek, though I didn't recognize it then." Willow felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, "so much that it frightens me sometimes." "Why does it frighten you?" She looked down at their joined hands. "Because I've lost everyone I've ever loved, my brother, my parents. I couldn't bear to lose you too." Hayes gently tilted her chin up until their eyes met. "You won't lose me. Whatever lies ahead in Oregon, we'll face it together, I promise you that." "As husband and wife?" Willow asked, remembering how naturally he had used the term earlier. "If you'll have me," Hayes replied, his expression both hopeful and vulnerable. "I know I have little to offer you now, no home, no land, not even the protection of my badge anymore, but I swear I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Willow silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her love and certainty into the gesture. When they parted, she smiled through her tears. "You already are worthy, Hayes Norton, and yes, I'll have you today, tomorrow, for all the days we're granted together." That night, in the safety of the Nez Perce Lodge, they made their private vows to each other, witnessed only by the stars visible through the smoke hole above. No minister blessed their union, no paper recorded it, but in their hearts, they were truly married. At dawn, they prepared to leave with Eagle Feather, Thunder Bear's son, the same scarred warrior who had first encountered them. The chief presented them with parting gifts: a fine bow for Hayes, a necklace of bear claws for Willow, and provisions for the journey ahead. "The white man's justice does not always serve the innocent," Thunder Bear said as they mounted their horses. "But the Great Spirit sees the truth in all hearts. He will guide you to the place where you belong." With these words of blessing, they departed the Nez Perce camp, following Eagle Feather along hidden trails that wound through dense forests and across mountain streams. The young warrior proved to be a skilled guide, leading them through passages that no white tracker would ever find, always alert for signs of danger. On their second day of travel with Eagle Feather, they narrowly avoided a confrontation with a Pinkerton search party. The detectives' voices carried through the trees as they discussed which direction to take at a fork in the main trail. From their hidden position on a ridge above, Willow could see the frustration on the men's faces as they argued over contradictory tracks and false leads. "They lose your trail," Eagle Feather observed with quiet satisfaction. "Soon they give up, go back to collect their money for easier prey." "I hope you're right," Hayes murmured, though his expression remained concerned. They continued westward, the landscape gradually changing as they neared the Oregon border. Eagle Feather explained that they would reach the Snake River by nightfall, the natural boundary that would take them into Oregon territory. As promised, they arrived at the river just as the sun was setting, casting golden light across the swift-flowing water. On the far shore lay Oregon and freedom. "This is where I leave you," Eagle Feather said, dismounting at the river's edge. "Cross here where the water runs shallow over stone. Follow the setting sun for 2 more days, and you will reach white settlements where my people do not go." Hayes clasped the young warrior's hand in gratitude. "We owe you a debt we can never repay." Eagle Feather shook his head. "No debt. My father lives because of you. Now these lives," he gestured to Hayes and Willow, "continue because of him. The circle is complete." With a final nod of farewell, the Nez Perce warrior mounted his horse and disappeared back into the forest, leaving them alone at the river's edge. The crossing was challenging but manageable, the water reaching only to the horses' bellies at its deepest point. As they climbed the western bank, now officially in Oregon territory, Willow felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They were not yet at their destination, but they had crossed a significant threshold both literally and symbolically. They made camp that night beneath towering pines, building a small fire to dry their damp clothing and cook a simple meal. The stars emerged one by one in the clear sky above, while an owl called from a nearby branch. "How much farther to your brother's ranch?" Willow asked as they sat close together by the fire. 2, maybe 3 days' ride," Hayes replied, his arm around her shoulders. "It's near the coast in a valley protected from the worst of the ocean storms." "Do you think he'll welcome us, both of us?" Hayes smiled, kissing her temple. "Henry's always had a big heart and a generous spirit, and he's been trying to get me to join him for years." His expression grew more serious. "But even if he weren't my brother, he's a man who believes in second chances. His late wife had a past that others judged harshly, but Henry only saw the person she became, not the mistakes behind her." This revelation eased some of Willow's anxiety. "What will we do there? I mean, for work, for living? Henry needs help with the ranch, that's genuine. The land's too much for one man to work properly." Hayes gestured toward the west. "And the nearest town has a small school that's been without a teacher for almost a year. The children are getting their lessons from the minister's wife, who has no training and too many other duties." Hope blossomed in Willow's heart. "You think they might hire me, even with no references, no background they can verify?" "Small frontier towns don't ask too many questions when they need something badly enough," Hayes said. "Besides, we can create a history that's close enough to the truth without revealing the parts that would endanger you." They spent that evening planning their future together, the story they would tell, the lives they would build, the family they hoped to create. For the first time since fleeing Redemption Creek, Willow allowed herself to believe that true happiness might be possible. The remaining journey to Henry Norton's ranch passed without incident. As they traveled westward, the landscape transformed from dry pine forests to lush, green countryside. The air grew damper, carrying the distant scent of the Pacific Ocean. Small farms and homesteads began to appear, though they still avoided contact with other travelers when possible. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they crested a hill and looked down upon a beautiful valley cradled between gentle slopes. A sturdy two-story farmhouse stood near a clear stream, surrounded by well-tended fields and pastures where cattle and horses grazed. Beyond the immediate farmland stretched untamed forests, and in the far distance, a thin line of blue suggested the presence of the ocean. "That's it," Hayes said, a note of emotion in his voice. "That's Henry's place." They rode down into the valley, following a well-maintained dirt road that led to the farmhouse. As they approached, a tall figure emerged from a nearby barn, pausing to watch their arrival. Even at a distance, the family resemblance was clear. Henry Norton had the same broad shoulders and upright bearing as his younger brother, though his hair was lighter and his face more weathered by the coastal elements. Hayes urged his horse forward, raising a hand in greeting. Henry squinted against the late afternoon sun, his expression shifting from wariness to disbelief to joy as he recognized his visitor. "Hayes," he called, striding toward them. "Is that really you?" Hayes dismounted, meeting his brother halfway. The men embraced roughly, pounding each other's backs in the manner of those unused to displaying affection. "Didn't think you'd ever take me up on the offer," Henry said, stepping back to look at his brother properly. "What happened? Your letters stopped coming months ago." "It's a long story," Hayes replied, glancing back at Willow, who remained mounted, uncertain of her welcome. Henry followed his gaze, noticing her for the first time. "And who might this be?" Hayes moved to help Willow dismount, his hand lingering supportively at her waist. "Henry, this is Willow Evans, Norton now, my wife." Surprise flashed across Henry's face, followed quickly by warm curiosity. "Wife, well now, that is news." He stepped forward, offering his hand to Willow. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Norton. Any woman who could convince my stubborn brother to leave Montana must be something special indeed." Willow took his hand, relieved by the genuine welcome in his voice. "Thank you, Mr. Norton. Hayes has told me so much about you. It's Henry, please." He looked between them, noticing their travel-worn appearance and the caution in their eyes. "I reckon there's more to this surprise visit than just deciding to take up farming, but explanations can wait until you've had a chance to rest and eat." He led them toward the house, taking the reins of their tired horses. "I'll see to your mounts. Go on inside and make yourselves at home. There's hot water on the stove if you want to wash up." The farmhouse was spacious and surprisingly comfortable, furnished with a blend of frontier practicality and unexpected touches of refinement. Hand-braided rugs covered the plank floors, while curtains of faded blue cotton softened the windows. A well-used piano stood against one wall of the main room, sheet music open on its stand. "Sarah's," Hayes explained, following Willow's gaze to the instrument. "Henry mentioned in his letters that she was quite accomplished." They took advantage of the hot water to wash away the dust of travel, changing into the cleanest clothes they had left. By the time Henry returned from settling their horses, they were seated at the kitchen table, looking more presentable but still clearly exhausted from their journey. Henry busied himself preparing a simple but hearty meal, waving away their offers of help. "Been cooking for myself since Sarah passed," he said. "Got used to it, though I won't turn down assistance tomorrow if you're offering." Over beef stew and fresh bread, Hayes began to explain their situation, starting with the night in Redemption Creek and continuing through their journey west. Henry listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled as the tale unfolded. "That's a hard road you've traveled," he said when Hayes finished. "And these Pinkertons, you're sure they're still searching?" "Last we heard," Hayes confirmed. "Though we've been careful to leave false trails, and crossing Nez Perce territory likely threw them off our scent." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you're welcome here for as long as you need, forever if that suits you," he smiled at Willow. "Always wanted a sister, and the house has been too quiet since Sarah's passing." "You're very kind," Willow said. "We don't want to bring trouble to your door." "Family isn't trouble," Henry replied firmly. "Besides, folks around here mind their own business. Valley's pretty isolated, especially in winter. News from the east takes months to reach us if it arrives at all." That night, settled in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Willow allowed herself to believe they might truly have found sanctuary. Hayes's steady breathing beside her, the solid roof over their heads, the promise of community and purpose, all of it seemed like a dream after their long ordeal. The following days established a rhythm to their new life. Hayes worked alongside Henry in the fields and pastures, relearning skills from his youth and developing new ones specific to coastal farming. Willow took over the management of the house, bringing order to rooms that had been neglected since Sarah's death. She planted a vegetable garden, preserved the fall harvest, and began to add feminine touches to what had become a bachelor's dwelling. 2 weeks after their arrival, Henry drove them into the nearby town of Cedar Springs in his wagon. It was a small settlement, just a general store, a church, a smithy, and a handful of other businesses serving the surrounding farms and logging operations. At the general store, Henry introduced them simply as his brother and sister-in-law who had decided to join him on the ranch. If people wondered about their sudden appearance, they were too polite or too desperate for new neighbors to question the story. When Henry mentioned that Willow had been a teacher back east, the store owner's wife immediately brightened. "You don't say? Our last school teacher left almost a year ago. Pastor's wife has been doing her best, but with 5 children of her own, she's stretched mighty thin." Before the day was out, Willow had been introduced to the town council and offered the position of schoolteacher to begin after the harvest season ended. The salary was modest, but the opportunity to resume her vocation filled her with joy. As autumn deepened into winter, Willow and Hayes settled into their new life with growing confidence. The farmhouse, once a place of mourning for Henry, became a home again, filled with conversation and occasional laughter. In the evenings, Willow sometimes played Sarah's piano, her rusty skills improving with practice, while the brothers sat by the fire discussing the day's work or plans for spring planting. Christmas approached, bringing with it a sense of peace neither Willow nor Hayes had expected to find again. They had received no word of pursuit, no indication that their past had followed them to this remote corner of Oregon. On Christmas Eve, after a simple but festive dinner, Henry presented them with a surprise: the deed to a small parcel of land adjacent to the main ranch, with a sturdy cabin that had once belonged to a hired hand. "It needs some work," he admitted, "but it's sound. Thought you might want a place of your own now that you're settling in." Hayes was momentarily speechless, overcome by his brother's generosity. Willow squeezed his hand, blinking back tears of gratitude. "We can't accept such a gift," Hayes finally managed. "It's too much." Henry waved away the objection. "Not a gift exactly, more of an investment in the future. That section's perfect for the apple orchard you've been talking about. We'll work it together, share the profits." He grinned. "Besides, much as I love having you both here, a married couple deserves their own roof." Later that night, as they prepared for bed in the room that had become theirs, Willow noticed Hayes standing at the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape with a pensive expression. "What is it?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. "Just thinking about how much has changed in a few months' time," he replied, drawing her into his arms. "About how close we came to losing everything and how much we've gained instead." Willow leaned against him, absorbing his warmth. "Do you ever regret it?" "Leaving your position, your home, everything you knew," Hayes shook his head without hesitation. "Not for a moment. What I left behind was a shadow of what I've found with you." He kissed her gently. "Besides, I think I'm a better man here than I ever was wearing that badge." "You were always a good man," Willow insisted. "You just needed the right circumstances to show it." He smiled, tracing the line of her cheek with his fingertips. "I have something for you, an early Christmas gift." From his pocket, he withdrew a simple gold band. "It's not fancy," he said, suddenly looking uncertain. "I traded some work at the smithy for it, but I thought, well, we said our vows to each other, but you deserved a proper ring." Tears welled in Willow's eyes as she extended her left hand, allowing him to slip the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, gleaming in the lamplight. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "The most precious thing I've ever owned." Hayes cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Willow Norton, more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, her heart full to bursting. "For saving my life, for sharing your future, for showing me what true partnership means." As they sealed their renewed commitment with a kiss, Willow felt the last shadows of fear dissolve. They had found not just safety, but belonging, a place where forgiveness lived not just in words, but in daily actions and open hearts. Spring came to the valley with a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. Willow's school flourished, the children responding eagerly to her gentle guidance and creative teaching methods. Hayes and Henry planted the apple orchard on the newly cleared land, while also expanding the cattle herd and improving the ranch's infrastructure. The cabin Henry had gifted them became a true home, with a garden of herbs and flowers surrounding it, and curtains Willow had sewn herself brightening the windows. Though small, it was filled with love and growing contentment. In late April, as the apple trees burst into fragrant bloom, Willow made a discovery that completed their happiness. She was expecting a child, due to arrive before the year's end. The news was met with jubilation from both Hayes and Henry, the latter immediately beginning plans for a cradle carved from the same cedar wood that had built the main house. "Boy or girl, doesn't matter," Henry declared. "First Norton born in Oregon deserves something special to sleep in." As Willow's pregnancy progressed, their roots in the community deepened. The suspicious glances that sometimes greet newcomers in small towns had given way to genuine acceptance. Hayes joined the town council, while Willow organized a small library in a corner of the schoolhouse, using books donated by families and ordered from catalogs. In October, with the harvest completed and the first autumn rains beginning, Willow gave birth to a daughter. They named her Sarah Hope Norton, honoring both Henry's late wife and the emotion that had sustained them through their darkest days. The baby thrived, bringing joy not just to her parents but to her uncle and the wider community. Her christening at the small church in Cedar Springs became a celebration for the entire town, with a potluck dinner afterward that lasted well into the evening. As Willow watched Hayes cradling their daughter, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration, she reflected on the strange, terrible, wonderful journey that had brought them to this moment. From a desperate flight through the night to a life filled with purpose and love, none of it would have happened if not for that first act of courage and compassion when Hayes chose justice over law. Later that evening, after the festivities had ended and they had returned to their cabin, Hayes found Willow standing on the porch, gazing at the stars while little Sarah slept peacefully inside. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Willow leaned into his embrace. "I was thinking about what you said that night in Redemption Creek when I told you they would never forgive me, about going where forgiveness lives," she nodded, turning in his arms to face him. "I didn't understand then what you meant. I thought you were talking about a place somewhere far away where no one would know what I'd done." Hayes brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And now I understand that forgiveness isn't a place at all. It's a choice we make every day to let go of the past, to believe in second chances, to see the best in each other." She rested her hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "You taught me that, Hayes. You chose to forgive the world that had disappointed you, to forgive yourself for the things you couldn't change, and in doing so, you taught me to forgive myself too." Hayes tightened his arms around her. "We found it together, Willow. This life, this love, it's more than I ever dared to hope for." As they stood together under the vast Oregon sky, the sounds of their sleeping child drifting through the open window, Willow knew with absolute certainty that they had indeed found what they sought, not just a place to hide, but a place to heal, to grow, and to love without reservation. In the years that followed, their family expanded with the birth of a son, William Hayes Norton, named for Willow's lost brother and his father. The apple orchard flourished, becoming known throughout the region for the quality of its fruit. The school under Willow's direction grew large enough to require a proper building, which the town erected with communal labor and great pride. Occasionally, news would reach them from the east, fragments of information about Redemption Creek and the people they had left behind. They learned that Mayor Thompson had eventually lost his position after other women came forward with accusations against his son, too late for justice, but in time for truth. They heard that their disappearance had become something of a legend, embellished with each telling until the story barely resembled the reality they had lived. But these echoes from the past no longer held power over them. The life they had built together, founded on love, strengthened by shared purpose, enriched by family and community, was more real than any shadow of what had been. And when their children asked, as children eventually do, about how their parents met and came to Oregon, Hayes and Willow would share a look of quiet understanding before telling a story of courage, of difficult choices, and of the transformative power of forgiveness both given and received. It was a story that began with fear and flight, but ended with the deepest kind of homecoming, not to a place, but to each other. A story of how two souls, wounded by circumstance but not broken by it, found in each other the strength to begin again. A story of going where forgiveness lives, and building a life there worthy of the second chance they had been given.